Welcome to the Life Coaching Podcast, your go-to source for inspiration, transformation, and actionable insights. I am your host, Angel Gonzalez, and I am thrilled to have you on this journey towards personal excellence and empowerment. In each episode, I dive deep into the realms of life coaching, wealth creation, and personal development, sharing transformational stories from individuals who have achieved significant breakthroughs in their lives. Whether you are aiming to redefine your career, improve your relationships, or discover your true passions, this podcast is your partner in unlocking your full potential. Join me every week to hear from thought leaders, experts, and everyday heroes who share their practical strategies and heartfelt stories of success. If you are ready to unleash your potential, let's get started. This is the Life Coaching Podcast. I am Angel Gonzalez, and I have the pleasure of having today Dr. Robb Kelly. Dr. Robb Kelly is a neuroscientist with a PhD in psychology from the University Trinity College, and he got his second PhD on psychology and behavioral science from the University of Southampton in the US. Robb Kelly is a national certified recovery coach level 1 in the US with additional certifications in somatic experience practitioner, NLP, life coaching, brain spotted practitioner, and certified international interventionist. And also is a published author with several papers and books. Today we will be talking about addiction recovery. He believes in treating the causes of addiction and not the symptoms. Welcome to the Life Coaching Podcast, Dr. Robb Kelly.
Thank you so much indeed. Great to be here, guys.
It is our pleasure to having you here. I wanted to start this interview by asking about your personal story, life story. One of the things that you target mainly is addictions, and you consider that addiction need to be treated from the cause root. And you experience yourself certain addictions in your life. So I would like you to tell this audience what about your own experience and how did you overcome these issues?
So I grew up in Manchester, England, is where I was born, and I belong to a musical family. So at the age of 9, I'm on stage with my musical family, playing in bars and clubs every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night. I took my first drink at the age of 9 and didn't know anything about alcoholism or addiction, but it started off a TikTok over to full-blown alcoholism. So I didn't know how or why. I just know I liked drinking. I drank more and more and more. Went through high school, went through college, still drinking. And then as I left college, I started my own business. And the drinking got worse and worse. And eventually, I got married, had 2 children. Once again, drinking didn't stop. It was 7 days a week, probably 14 hours a day I was drinking. And eventually, it all crumbled down where I lost my wife, my kids, my house, my cars, my medical stuff, and I was homeless on the streets of Manchester. And I stayed homeless for about 14 months. So that was the lowest part. I died twice on the streets in Manchester. That was 7 suicide attempts, and on the 2 occasions it worked and actually died. Was pronounced dead twice. And then I don't know, man. It's just it was a spiritual experience that got me off the streets. And then my daughters were taken away from me at the ages of 1 and 3, and my wife left, and I was just on the streets waiting to die. And I honestly thought I would die on the streets because I didn't want to live and I didn't want to die. It was just crazy. I was in this state of mental illness that very few people get to. I always say I didn't go to hell when I was on the streets, but I could sure see it from where I was. It was just hell on earth where I was, and the torment and the pain and the suicides, and it was just absolutely terrible. And it was just a horrible time.
I can just imagine, Dr. Robb. I would like to ask you a bit more about it, because sometimes it could be maybe something that most people cannot believe, how an accomplished scientist, a neuroscientist, with deep studies in psychology could fall into this pattern. Of course, you started when you were just a kid, and this was something that just grow over the time. I can just come to the conclusion that you were going through a hard depression state of in your life during that period. However, I would like you to describe how happened that you got into this pattern of alcoholism, and what happened, what triggered you to come out of this issue. Was the fact that you were declared dead, or was something else that happened during that period that you got able to come back to life and start working on yourself in order to recover from alcoholism?
Well, alcoholics are born and drug addicts are made. So alcoholics have the predisposition. So the minute I took the first drink, all bets were off. The hypothalamus, the basal ganglia, and the amygdala are default setting with the alcoholic. It's a generational thing. You can trace it 3 generations back. Now, drug addiction is the addicted personality. It's different from alcoholism. The reason why alcoholism is a disease is because of the hypothalamus, which is our survival part of the brain. So the choices, once I started drinking, were taken away from me till eventually I couldn't stop drinking. So when you're in that situation, there's only a few ways to go. Locking me up in a treatment center never worked. I've been there 12 times. So I knew there's something going on in the brain that nobody knew about, because medical people today still don't know about alcoholism or addiction. They're not interested really, unless they give you a pill or stick you in a treatment center or a hospital. So they're gaining money off you. So it's a very misunderstood disease. But I got off the streets. I was very lucky to get off the streets. I met a guy called Derek who helped me. And it was just absolutely phenomenal what he did. And eventually I got back on my feet. For about a year, I had a little apartment. I still didn't see my children. And then I got the opportunity 20 years ago to come over to America for 2 weeks. So I took that opportunity because I really didn't have anything in England. I came over for 2 weeks only. And when I got to Dallas, Texas, as soon as I landed and stepped off the plane, something told me that I'd never go back home again. And it was here where we started the studying of what alcoholism, addiction, childhood trauma, PTSD, depression, all the stuff that we cover, what it's really about. Because addiction, alcoholism, depression, and PTSD are not what you think they are. People follow sheep. You know, they get depression, they go to the doctor. Well, there's other ways rather than going to take a false serotonin that depletes my serotonin over a period of time, which means I depend on that pill that I'm taking to be happy of sorts. It doesn't make us really happy. So our own serotonin depletes, and then we're stuck on that pill. Drug addiction is 90% of patients that come to us, and we've had 9,500 so far with a heroin addiction started in the doctor's office. So the addictive personality will take something, and continue until you're addicted to that, whatever that may be. Just so instance that drugs are really dangerous, but you could be addicted to sport, you can be addicted to porn, to food, and that addiction will take off. Now here's the proof of the matter is they both show up the same. So to the layman, drug addiction and alcoholism is exactly the same. What we'll say, because of the neuroscience behind it all, is it differs. It really does differ. So we were intrigued about what was going on, because if me and you went out on the streets of Texas today and we asked 100 people, tell me what an alcoholic is, they'll tell you it's somebody who drinks too much alcohol, and that's not true. You cannot drink yourself and to become an alcoholic, but you can take enough drugs to become a drug addict. You can go to the gym so much to become an addict. You can eat enough food to be an addict. It's all different ways, but alcoholism is slightly different. That's what we specialize in. I have a PhD in behavioral science, a PhD in psychology, and multiple other certificates and diplomas from schools and colleges. And we're neuroscience experts. I'm not so much a neuroscientist. I'm a behavioral scientist, but we deal with neuroscience today only. So when we get into the neuroscience of anything to do with the human body and brain and the mind, we can change and reprogram the way the brain works. So we pull away from the childhood trauma and all the other trauma we have, and we reprogram the brain and reprogram you so you can go on and have a great life. And we work with entrepreneurs, we work with addicts, we work with food, people who want to be successful, people who are depressed, and rich people are depressed. Like I work with A-list celebrities only right now. My staff, work with other people, but you go into a house worth $150 million and you think they're going to have a great life, and that's not the case. Depression and addiction and PTSD are all hidden gems that we don't know too much about right now.
That's a fantastic explanation, Dr. Robb. That brings me to my next question, because before I ask you this question, I just want to share a bit of my story. I used to be a smoker. I smoked my first cigarette when I was 11 years old. So in order to, if we look at the different stages of addiction, so my first try was when I was 11 years old. Then I have a period in which, probably because of shame or fear, I didn't try another cigarette for a couple of years until I started doing on regular basis. Probably I was between 12 and 13 years old. So I smoked consistently until the age of 35, probably. I am 40 now, 5 years clear of tobacco. And that's how this addiction happens. So it started with something that probably was lacking of during the teenage. I always relate to confidence, even fear. And then it was the supplement of that relaxation process when I was feeling anxious, or I was feeling with any type of fear or lack of confidence in certain scenarios. So always recurring to a cigarette was actually the way out to that state. Now, when we talk about addictions, usually it happens this way. There is a first moment when we decide to try something, and then it's the regularity of the consumption until it becomes an addiction. And you certainly point that when it's about alcohol, it's not just the fact of the amount of drinks that you have per day or per week or per year. However, it's the consistency or the regularity of the habit. Same occur with cigarettes, same occur with food, even with work or sex. When we talk about addictions, how people can realize themselves that something different from the traditionals or well-known drugs that are in the market, whether they are licit or illicit, these people can actually realize, hey, I am experiencing this addiction. I have to do something about it.
Anything that takes you away from your normal activities. So if you go to the gym every single day, that's looked at as good. So when it becomes an addiction is when you cannot miss a day for whatever reason, or you go on vacation somewhere with the family, and the first thing you do is look for a gym, and you're there 3 or 4 hours a day on vacation, then you have a problem. Anything that you do repetitive that damages you is also bad. So cake, food, sex, porn, whatever it is, if you do it repeated on a daily basis, no matter what else happens, you have to do it, then you have an addiction. Again, alcohol is slightly different. Everybody wants to throw he drinks a lot, he's an alcoholic. It's not true. It's not true. It's different, completely different than that. We have to understand that. So if you think you have a problem with alcohol and you ask somebody, do I have a problem? Then you probably do. So everybody knows somebody with an addiction or alcohol problem. And if you don't, it's probably you, is what we usually say. So the addiction is something that takes over you completely. Like I say, be careful, because someone look good, but at the end of the day, on long-term period, they're not. So if you're going to the gym every day and strenuous, it might look as getting fit. But if you're not looking at the food intake that you're taking, and you're not looking at the vitals every day to see if you're damaging the internal or the psychological effects of that, then you will suffer.
When you talk about the gym, for example, I live in Australia. Here, the culture of going to the gym, self-care, and making sure that you foster a good and shaped body is well rooted in the culture. Now, what happened? I used to go to the gym every single day, no matter what, on the different hours of the day. Sometimes I decided to train at midnight because it was more peaceful. Sometimes I decided to train first thing in the morning. Sometimes I decided to do it in the evening because of my work. My point is, I used to do it 7 days a week, no matter what, because it was part of my routine, my habit, and I was feeling well. At, at what point going to the gym can, can be considered an addiction?
If, let's say, for instance, you have a family and children, and your gym appointment is 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and at 12 o'clock, 12:15, your child has a terrible accident, and off they go to the hospital, the wife and the child. And if you're going to still go to the gym while she's in the hospital, you have a problem. So it's anything that takes us away from normal activities. So balance is very important. You can train every day. You could train 45 minutes a day, which is not really good for you because of, well, it depends on what areas you're training, but the body needs to repair. A lot of things we don't do. Oxygen and rest is something that we don't do properly. We think we do, but we don't. So as long as you're looking after yourself, therapists do this all the time when they look after people and they don't look after themselves. And eventually they will break down. Just like the guy going to the gym every day or watching porn every day. It's like when it becomes a habit that takes you away, then it could become dangerous. So it's all about balance.
Fair enough. Now, any addiction, it's about seeking reward. And anything that we want to accomplish in life, it's about seeking reward. For example, you mentioned before, when we start working in order to become successful, or we start working because we want to get the prize on the other side of the curtain. I used to be a journalist, and one of the things that actually motivated me at the beginning of my career was the fact that every single year I was receiving a prize because of my labor in different papers where I used to work. Now, this is part of that relation between work and reward that usually motivates people to continue the path where they are. In this case, how do you consider that we could be more alert in order to find out early signs that prevent people from falling into addiction, for example, workaholism, and how dopamine, from the point of view of neuroscience, how dopamine actually interact or even have a bit of guilt when it is about people falling into these type of addictions?
You've got to look at the reward system as a whole in the brain. You've got to look at how that reward system works. And again, it's all about balance. So there's 4 chemicals in the brain that need to happen every day to be happy: dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins. So them 4 chemicals, once all active in the brain, takes us into a higher state of happiness, which is good. The only problem that a lot of people don't know is serotonin and dopamine are created in the gut. So unless we're eating and looking after ourselves, we're chasing happiness and we're never going to get it. So we have to, again, you've got to look what you're doing, how you're doing it, how you take care of yourself. I don't think personally you go to the gym and that's the be all end all. Just go to the gym, that's all you do. I don't think you could, eat food all day long. There's a lot more to it and it becomes psychological. There's something broken, especially with the childhood trauma that's carried through to adult life, that gets you to repeat a behavior is either good or bad. So again, you've got to look. If you're going to the gym 7 days a week, great. I was friends with Arnold Schwarzenegger for a long time and used to always say after 3 days, you take a day off for the body to rest. So if you're not taking days off and you're there every single day, you've got to look at what you're gaining, what do you look like, what you're gaining, the mental state. Do you have to go there? If there was an accident, can you stay at home? Can you, all this stuff we need to look at. So it gives you an early sight of any addictions that you're having. So repeated behavior for a reward that sometimes isn't there is the key. So if I do something good and my boss gives me a car, that's awesome. But if he keeps telling me every single day I'm turning up at 6 o'clock in the morning, it's 10 at night, I'm not winning anything, I'm chasing, that's not good. So the reward system as a whole needs to be identified on what do you want out of this behavior that you're doing. So chasing jobs until you become a CEO or to become a millionaire is healthy, it's good. But once again, it's the balance. A lot of people think it's really hard to earn $1 million, and it's not. The only thing you have to do is clear the past, clear the trauma and your negative behavior, your self-sabotage behavior, and alter the mind. And you can do anything you want to do. You can be as rich as you want. You can be the best father in the world. You can build businesses. You can work for Walmart. It makes no difference because you have the mind that can program the brain. So mind over matter, we've heard the saying, mind over matter. It's actually true. The mind is energy, you can't see it, and the matter is the brain that surrounds it. So the energy is there. Once we can program that energy to run the brain first thing in the morning, to get rid of the subconscious brain and ignite the conscious brain, you're capable of anything.
Absolutely. Absolutely right. This brings me to another question. You are a neuroscientist or neuroscience expert, and also you are a coach. I am a life coach. I work with NLP and different approaches from positive psychology as well. There are quite a few points of view regarding the coach profession nowadays, because one of the things that used to be part of the methodology of the coach or how we become coaches is almost working on the verge of workaholic or workaholism. We learn how to produce and produce until things happen for us, for ourselves. I want to know, from the point of view of neuroscience and your own experience working probably with different coaches along the way, do you think that at a certain point this profession could be causing certain damage for people that end up turning into workaholics because of the fact that people get addicted to these type of methods, to these type of jobs and experiences?
I think the best thing to look at is work smarter, not longer, is the idea. Look at your mental state. Make sure you're looking after your mental illness or wellness and your state of mind before we go on. There's a huge thing when coaching first came out that nobody's qualified, you shouldn't be doing this, you're killing people, because you can be nobody. In America, you don't, well, in Texas, you don't need a license or nothing. You can just call yourself a coach and away you go. What we've seen is coaches that have no idea from a university point of view can sometimes be dangerous, but I've also found that coaches with experience in what they're teaching is usually amazing. Like 98% of what I teach today is from my homelessness, my streetwise, going up the streets and making something of myself. Not so much 2 PhDs, masters and bachelors. It's really important that we look at that as well. But it's all my coaches are master's levels therapists, but we don't do therapy. We do coaching only because the constraints of therapy and psychology as itself, or psychiatry, are very bound into what we can't do and what we can do. We found this about 10 years ago when we first started using Zoom, probably before that, I can't remember. But it's important that you know who you are and you know your limitations. Limitations is the key. I tell my coaches all the time when we're training them, if you get something that you're not sure of, that you know enough information, you have to pass it on to another coach, or you have to send them to a licensed therapist, because there's certain things we can't go there. You could damage the mind, you could damage the behavior if you're telling them to do one thing and it's not true. You know, it's always wise to get a coaching program under your belt before you can go out and do that. But I think the life expectancy of a coach can be long. I'm 63 now. I've been a psychologist for over 30 years, licensed in Texas and the UK. So most of my work is under psychologists, but all my staff are coaches. So you just have to work smarter. You don't have to work 12 hours a day to become a millionaire. You don't have to work 12 hours a day to help a lot of people. You could help people 6 to 8 hours a day and be more productive than you are in the 12 hours. And I always thought money would make me happy, because I come from the projects, I come from council estates and poor background. I thought if I just get my first $100,000 in the bank, like when I came to America, I didn't have anything. I had about £100 in the bank, which is probably about $120. if I just get like 10 grand, that came, that way, just get 50 grand. I said to him, 100 grand, if we have 100 grand in the bank, I can relax and I'm not going to chase work anymore. Got 100. Well, listen, 250, that's a great 2 million. No, 5 million, 10 million. It didn't start. So we made $10 million in the bank. I still wanted more. So then I had to look at me. I had to look at myself that nobody else could do. I was like, why am I killing myself? Why am I always chasing something to better than what I have? And today I have what a lot of people don't have, and that is enough. I have enough today. I have enough toys, I have enough cars, I have enough money, I have enough patients, I have enough TV, books, all the stuff that I have enough, you know? And when you can get to that situation, it's like, there's a certain point when you have to cut off and go, how much money do I need? You know? And then when you're going out, you know, you're doing talking things for 25 grand at a time, it's insane. It's insane. When I have patients paying $150,000 a month for 30 hours, it's insane. So then you start chase, whatever it's at 10, if it's at 20 million, you've got to stop, man. You really are. So it's important that you know oneself, you know one's limit, you know your limitations, you know your confidence. You can go out there and change the world. There's no that I expect everybody listening to this program to change the world from tomorrow. It's not that hard. It's real easy. But remember, guys, in any situation, the more knowledge, the better you'll be.
Life mastery is the ultimate tool for discovering your real self and healing from any personal constraint that might hinder your growth. The purpose of this journey is to nurture your mental health and foster a space of self-development, self-awareness, and self-love, which can impact positively your thoughts, actions, and behaviors. Embark in this exciting world of personal growth by committing to answer a handful of daily questions designed to guide you through a path of development, happiness, and fulfillment.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the best signs to avoid falling into the pattern of addiction, because if you realize that you have enough, probably you can focus more on enjoying what you have rather than keep sitting and keep pursuing more and more of what you already have, of what already satisfied your life. And I was watching this week something about Adam Sandler, for example. This report said about the lifestyle of the actor. I wish I could see with my own eyes, but the report indicates that Adam Sandler put almost 100% of his income into charities, and he lived as a really humble man. I think that at a certain point he could say, well, I have more than enough and I want to live this way. I want to experience life in this way and actually contribute with humanity and donating more than anybody could do for charities. Probably that's the most important sign that anybody can have. Is I'm not saying that everyone needs to live as Adam Sandler lived. We all want to pursue the reward and we all want to get the return of our investment, but definitely realizing, oh, this is enough for me to live well, and this is enough for me to experience life fully as I really want, probably is the best sign to realize I don't need to fall into the pattern of any addiction. And this drives into my next question for you, Dr. Kelly. It is about the genetics. I believe that most of the issues that we can experience in our life that are associated with our state of mind are actually mapped already in our genome. I would like to know from your experience and expertise, how accurate is this view and how this can be part of the causes of the addiction in any type of addictions?
Epigenetics is really important, but there's a lot of myths around health and diseases that the health industry and the pharmaceutical companies want us to believe. And one of them is, if my dad had heart problems and then I get heart problems later on in life, then my dad's passed that down. That's biologically impossible. Here's what happens. My dad has a staple diet from home with mom, me, and my two sisters. Let's say it's onions. there's a protein or food that you can't methylate. If you can't methylate that protein or food or enzyme, then what happens is there becomes a deficiency in the body. That's why we need to get back to raw foods and not plastic foods that we eat today. That deficiency may be heart problems. It may be brain, it may be lungs, it may be growth, it might be inflammation. But I have the same genes almost like my dad. So when I leave the house, I continue with the staple diet that my parents used to give me. So I eat onions. And what happens is because I can't methylate that, and we don't know about this, out in public, if I can't methylize that, it will cause the same heart disease. And then I think that's passed it on. That's not true. So it all comes round to food that we intake. 90% of the food that we have in America is not real food. It's fake food, it's plastic food. If you go to the supermarket and I did a live TV thing the other day in San Antonio, is pick up this bar of 9 grams of protein, 0 fat. Wow, it's going to be great for you. Took it off the shelf, spun it around. The first ingredient was canola oil, the rancid oil that kills us. And then the red colors, yellow colors, all the stuff that kills us. So you really want to take care of the ingredients, whatever you eat. And by eating properly, we'll be healthier when the other things are introduced. The oxygen, the presence of oxygen equals lack of disease. We don't get enough oxygen. We only breathe 45% of our lung capacity. We should be breathing 100. And that's why we have what's called a breath work every morning to set the day off. So yeah, I mean, you just gotta understand that it's food. Food does it. Even if you're a gym guy and you want to build muscle, it's 90% food, 10% gym. And that's what most things is we don't eat right. Some parts of the world do, and you get them guys living to 80s, 90s, 100s. But in the US, we don't do that. We just don't. We think we are eating well. That's the problem, which causes all the illnesses, is lack of oxygen in the food that we eat. The methylation process as a whole, people don't really know about it. So if you can't methylate, again, protein food, the deficiency will happen. So the more raw foods we can put into our body, the better. It really is. And I even vitamins, 90% of them have got cyanide in them. So I go for organic everything today, and it will heal the body. Everything you need out there is away from prescriptions. You don't need that. You just need the good food that will check off everything else in your body completely, and you'll live a longer life. And just going back to Adam, Adam's a friend of mine, and I love the way he dresses, and I love the way he acts. I mean, he does things today because it's fun, and I like that. And he dresses like I do. The idea is when you be rich is to dress as if you're not rich. You see, all the guys that are not rich start trying to dress as the rich. You've got the fake Rolexes on, they've got the Louis Vuittons on. So they spent $3,000 on a Louis Vuitton and they live in a trailer and got no money for work the next day. It's like Louis Vuitton is not marketed to rich people. It's marketed to poor people so they can look like rich people. It's crazy, the world we live in.
As much as many of the big brands are not marketed to the rich, are marketed to the poor, because it's what make feel people certain status. If I wear a certain brand, I have a status, even though I don't have the money in the bank. So that's part of the deal. That's part of the branding and marketing. Now, you were mentioning that genetics or epigenetics are not associated with any type of addiction, but my question point more in case of addictions that are related or associated with specific drugs. Let's say, for example, that somebody is coming from an addict parent who consume any type of drug, with synthetics or not. Can this be passed genetically to that child, and how likely is that child become addicted himself or herself along the path? And how this person, talking about causes, how this person can actually realize if this is happening in their life, in his or her life, and how to treat them.
There's definitely a gene set down to most of the things we do today that you can spot depending what that is that we're doing. So drug addicts, every alcoholic has a father or grandfather alcoholic. If you don't, you're probably not alcoholic. The same with drug addicts, same with behavior. So the behavioral problems as well is exactly the same. It's the mirroring part of the brain that passed down. It's the behavioral sciences passed down. The genetics are passed down. You know, epigenetics is a study of how DNA is chemically modified to control a gene without changing that DNA. So the passed down without us even knowing or being able to act on that. So again, it's about being aware of who you are. The biggest question I ask people today is, what is your identity? And 90% of people who ask that to cannot answer it. But once you get into that state, you know you're in trouble.
Absolutely, and that's one of the reasons why there are many issues, behavioral issues in this society today, because people don't realize who they are. People don't know who they are. And that's what make me go even deeper into this point, because if we are talking about behavior and environment that is set up for people to become addicted, and you grow in an environment, you grow in a home or any type of environment which have predisposition for this, and your genes are, your parents were addicted when they have you, so you have more predisposition to fall into this pattern. Also, what's happening with your identity? Your identity is the result of three main things. Number one is the belief system. Number two is your values. And number three is your role in life. So if your environment have a predisposition for you to become addict, that is part of your belief, what nurture your belief system and what nurture your values, because your environment influence over your life. So this person is not going to build a total different and unique identity from the environment in which they are living. So the predisposition to become addict in this type of environment are higher than any other person in that grow in different conditions. But the bottom line in this question is, how can we be, or how can our genes have a predisposition to this when we come from parents who are addicted to any sort of drugs, let's say cocaine, let's say LSD, let's say any type of drugs that could be in their blood system and pass through during the gestation time.
We've got to look as well. I love that, the patterns and everything in life. It's really good. I really like that. The identity lost. But the behavioral enmeshment and learned behavior around parents and children is really interesting. It's really, really interesting. So we've done many, many studies on this. It's like we've done, you know, how can a family influence a person? Real easy. So when child grows up with parents who, you know, that's porn or alcoholic and mom's this, and that, we capture that as being our normal way of life. So when we grow up around drugs in the house, we'll take drugs and it becomes normal. So as in let's say a guy that's grown up in a house that goes to church and everything seems to be good, they'd leave. They're not going to automatically stay in drugs. So the people around us as children has the most influence on us. So when the parents and caregivers have the influence on us, then we've got to look at people around us, even when, as a child, is we will mimic another person. It's a mirroring part of the brain, monkey see, monkey do. It's like if a group of people around you are behaving a certain way, you will behave that way. And we experiment and test and trial everything that I say. So how do we know that? Well, say I have 9 friends. Do I influence the 9 friends or do they influence me? Is the 9 friends will always influence me, even though I don't want to be influenced and out my life. But these guys sit around all day. They don't have jobs. They've got no ambitions. So we brought 10 people into our waiting room. 9 of them were actors. 1 of them was a real patient who I said, come in, we want to do a free, session with you. And she was all excited. The 9 actors were told, when you sat in the waiting room, pretend you are patients. And when a buzzer goes every 45 seconds, we want you to stand up. We want you to count to 10 and sit down again. And everything was set. And the 1 patient had no idea. And everyone was sat down. And she's like, everyone's playing on the phone. The 9 people stood up. And she kind of looked around and carried on. All sat down. They all stood up again. Now she's looking around and the phone is not really of importance now. And on the 3rd buzzer, she stood up with everybody else. Then she sat down with everybody else. As one by one, they were called into the back surgery. She was the only person left in the waiting room. She stood up. That's the behavioral science around who were around today. Show me your friends, I'll show you your future. It's the same one with children. If we're taught what's good and bad, if we're taught to stay away from people that we don't want to be today, if you want to be, if you're on 40 grand a year and you want to earn 80 grand a year, hang around the guys that earn 80,000 a year, because you never want to be the smartest guy in the room. People think, oh, if I'm the smart, no, you always want to be learning. You always want to, I want to take that behavioral trait, or I want to be this kind of way. And you should never put limits. You should never put the brakes on your imagination, because what you can imagine, you can become. We have a president that served 4 years the last term and is now president today. He had no political experience whatsoever. So don't tell me for a second that you can't achieve your dreams. It's just not true. But it's the patterning that's programmed you, that we attract what we think we are worth. But if I come out of the projects, if I've got no money to do anything, I'm wearing second-hand clothes and I can't get through school because my brother can't get, and his dad didn't, that's the set for the behavioral pattern to carry on through most of your life. And you have to really look around you. We were brought up in the projects. I swore to myself when I was about 12 years old, I'm not going to grow up on the project. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I had to change, because I'd seen mom and dad working all of their life for nothing. They had very little savings. They had no pensions or anything. I didn't want to do that. So I changed. Now, here's the important thing. The mind is energy. You can't see it, touch it, feel, okay? It's energy and it programs the brain. But when this energy connects with another energy, whether that be God's universe, another guy that you really get on with. So when the energy is there and neural pathways stroke behavior is changed, our DNA changes. And there's the answer. You have to change your DNA if you want to pull away and go in a different direction to what your caregivers, friends, and parents are.
That's an extraordinary answer. And thank you very much for that, Dr. Robb. I think that's really important in today's society, that realize this type of actions that we can take with absolute consciousness in order to make sure that we can make the changes that we want to experience in our own lives. I certainly agree with you on that. Now, talking about traditional addictions, drug addiction, for example, there is a rule that says that any person who is under addictions experience first 3 relapses before being out of the addiction. I would like you to please explain to this audience what is the science behind this, and how can we do something to avoid this to happen? Because when I remember, I quit smoking many times until I finally decided to stop smoking. So my relapse process, the repetition of my relapse was at least a dozen before I decided to stop smoking in reality. Let's say this was a easy going addiction with a legal drug, which is cigarettes. Now, how can people just avoid, or what can people do to avoid falling into this pattern consistently in 1 relapse, 2 relapse, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, just before get to the point, this doesn't serve me anymore. I want to do X, Y, Z in order to live a normal life.
When somebody relapses on whatever it is, it means there's no work being done around the psychological effects of it. So you have to understand with your life is you get to a point when you're not ready, you're not ready. No matter what the addiction is. If somebody comes to you, mom comes to you, or wife, you've got to go and get help until the person is ready. So the person has to realize what's unacceptable in his life and what's acceptable. Where he wants to go in life or doesn't want to go in life. Is he ambitious or is he not ambitious? Does he just want a normal job, 9 to 5 in the factory next door, or does he want more from life itself? Because we will repeat that behavior time and time and time again. So there is a point, and we really don't know where this is pertaining to the brain, is where the layman term is, I've had enough. I've just had enough. This behavior is not acceptable. It's hard. It's almost impossible with alcoholics because of the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus is our survival part of the brain. It tells everybody to eat food, drink water to survive. It's told us that from birth. The hypothalamus in the alcoholic turns around at a certain point of the drinking and tells the alcoholic to drink alcohol only to survive. That's why everybody else comes second, and I can go days or weeks without food or water. So when you're in that kind of mindset, a big change needs to happen pertaining to the 3 parts of the brain we talked about. For the addiction to anything, you have to sit down and do pros and cons around. If you think you're addicted to drugs or football, you have to do your pros and cons around that and where you want to be in life. Otherwise, the pattern will never break. So the pros is it makes me feel good. You know, the bad thing is I can't get up for work next day. You know, I don't do want to be ambitious. Well, kind of, but I don't want to be famous in any way. Well, it's going to be harder to get out of a pattern that doesn't want to change, because everything's about patterns. Guys, if you've ever been out like a work outing, or a bunch of guys, let's say, get together and they go get on a bus and they go to a club or something, or they go to the coast and they have a great time, and you know, 6 or 7 hours you're drinking, you're having a great time, and you get back on the bus, which seat do you sit in? And the answer is 9 out of 10 times the one you traveled there in. That's just an easy pattern to demonstrate. So these little sneaky patterns that we have, you have to start recognizing them, and you have to have a planned day. So I get my patients 5 things every day you write down you're going to achieve. Now, you may achieve 20 of them, but the 5 things you have to achieve. Now, I don't care if that's dinner, lunch, breakfast, or whatever. So when the 5 things start to happen every single day, there becomes a new pattern in the brain. So there's billions of neural pathways, which are patented thought patterns, die every day. 300 die every day. So the big question is what are you replacing them with? And that's where we start to restructure the brain. So if I'm too old to start this, that's not true. Well, I'm not any good at this. Says who? Who's told you that you're not good enough to be able to do this? Somebody's put that there. Babies are born with 2 fears. They're falling and loud noises. The rest are man-made. So we have to, again, understand the way we are as a person and how much we want to change in a different direction. And you can do this by planning your day out. So you do the 5 things like we just talked about. And if you come away from them 5 things, then their brain is scattered. That means the pattern that you want isn't working. And from the 5 things, we go on and repattern even more, so it's solidified. So once the basal ganglia picks up a routine or an action for long enough, like a pilot needs 10,000 hours in the air before he can fly a commercial jet. So that repetition of that action is the same with you when you're trying to learn or unlearn something. It has to happen a series of times before you pick it up. So the 300 neural pathways that die every day, we're replacing them with good stuff instead of bad stuff, and it'll take that time before everything is rewired to self-health and not self-sabotage, because most people are stuck with trauma with the self-sabotage thought patterns. So we want to do this, and if we don't, then we walk away from it, and we don't even try any harder. So you've got to understand and realize who you are. You've got to realize the patterns that you're in, really realize the patterns that you're in, and reprogram, which is not that hard. We use 9D therapy, online breathwork. We use EMDR online. We use brain spotting. We use NLP. We use all these tools to bring and repattern. And if your circumstances stay the same, once you try and change, not going to happen. You're going to always go back to old behaviors from the people around you. So if we have 2 houses, recovery in any sense, not just alcohol drugs, just in any sense, kind of have its own language. So let's say the 2 houses, let's say this guy lives in a house that only speaks Chinese, and us over here speak English. So if I pick the person up and we take him to our place and we teach him English, and now it's fluent in English, and we don't treat the family, then we're going to pick him up, we're going to put him back in a Chinese-speaking house, and what's he going to do? He's going to start speaking Chinese again. So the thing we've got with any kind of addiction is if the patient comes on board, then the family have to come on board as well. So the family dynamics go around the behavioral dynamics, which goes about which direction you're going to go in, because it all comes from back there. So when you move out and speak English, you need the whole family back at home to be speaking English as well. So when you move back in, you're on the same page in the same language. That's the same with life. Hang around the people that you want to be. That's it.
That's right. That's right. In case that the family doesn't want to be involved or to be part of that change, then is taking that patient out of the circle. Is that correct? If the patient want to make the change in reality.
Well, us today, because we've been in this industry a long time, is this. This is how we guarantee our 98% success rate. And the nearest one to us is 11%. Is when we take a patient, let's say it's the man, for instance, it's easier this way. The wife doesn't want to come on board, we won't touch the patient. Because we know the statistics of him getting well or changing a behavior while going back to the house is probably 1%.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely right. Absolutely right. Thank you very much for this insight. Dr. Robb, we are coming to the end of this episode today. I would like to ask you about the book, Daddy, Daddy, Please Stop Drinking. If you can share some insights, ideas, the central idea in the book that could serve to more people that are right now experiencing these issues in their life. Tell us how Daddy Daddy Please Stop Drinking can help.
Daddy Daddy Please Stop Drinking is part neuroscience, part behavioral, my story, the tragedy of me losing my two children, ages 1 and 3. There's photographs on the front of me and my eldest daughter. She was about 4 years old. It has lots of information about recovery. You'll laugh, you'll joke, you'll cry. There's a lot of sad parts in there. I've not left anything out. You'll see the full story of why I stabbed my wife 3 times one night because she won't let me finish my bottle of vodka. You'll see how the last thing my 3-year-old daughter said to me. And actual fact, for 30 years, I never saw my eldest daughter. And then 4 years ago, I got a message on Facebook. And it was Dad. It was my daughter. He said, "Hey, Dad." And she called me Dad. I was crying like crazy. So I went over there and she introduced me to my 3-month-old granddaughter. And we all made up, and the book was wrote, but we didn't have a title for it. And we're sat in her living room back in the UK, Manchester. And we told her about the book, and I want to dedicate it to her. And I said, the only thing is, it's been there. We've done it 3 months ago. It's been finished, but we don't know what to call it. And she said, "What about the last thing I said to you?" And I said, "I don't know what that is." And she said, "It was Daddy, Daddy, please stop drinking." And I couldn't do it. So what we're going to do, if you're in America, guys, when you're listening to this, just realize, mention this podcast. I got 5 free books. I'm going to sign them. I'm going to give you it free. I'm going to pay shipping. I'm going to send it over. As long as you mention this podcast, come and get in touch with us, send me a message, and then we'll send it you free of charge.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Kelly. I think this is heartbreaking, hard talking about these experiences. And I love the fact that you published this book. This is a life testimonial about what can happen in the life of one person and how a family can be affected by the sickness, the disease of falling into alcoholism. Thank you very much for this insight. Any final thoughts before saying hasta la vista in this episode?
Yeah, guys, just remember that you're strong enough, you're handsome enough, you're pretty enough, you can do anything you want in life. Don't let anybody tell you. I want you to remember this saying, guys, and it says who. Well, you can't do, says who. Who's making these rules up? Because I don't like him. When I first got married, me and Janet, we had an argument on the second day after our marriage. And she said, "This is the way marriage is." And I said, "Says who?" And we both looked at each other and went, "Oh my God." So make your own life up, make your own laughs, make your own team up around you. Just believe that you can stop any addiction. You can stop anything mentally happening to you. You can reverse the effect unless it's serious brain damage, and you can go out and change the world, And if you don't think you can change the world, try this, guys, when you're out next time in an area that's lots of people in there. Always look for people walking towards you with nice sneakers. They're always the best. And I wanted to say 2 words to them. You're just about to change the world with 2 words. And when you change the world changes for you. 2 words, nice sneakers. That's all I want you to say. "Hey, man, nice sneakers, that's all. Hey, thanks, man." And turn around and watch him walk away from you. He's going to look down his sneakers at least 2 or 3 times. Now you've just changed his whole world. But guess what? When he goes home to the wife or girlfriend, she's going to be in a good mood because he's in a good mood. And then the mother-in-law calls and you get a gist. You've just changed the world, man, and you'll be rewarded for that. So believe, no such thing as I can't, okay?
Yes, yes, absolutely. I agree 100% with you. And thank you very much for this great time and these insights about how to overcome addiction. And remember, use the hashtag, the Life Coaching Podcast, if you want to get one signed book from Dr. Robb Kelly, especially Daddy Daddy, Please Stop Drinking. Thank you very much, Dr. Robb Kelly. Thank you very much, all of you, for being present here. My name is Angel Gonzalez, and this is the Life Coaching Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the Life Coaching Podcast. I hope that today's episode has empowered and inspired you to take bold steps towards your own personal and professional breakthrough. If you found value in today's stories and insights, please share this episode with your friends and family, because your feedback fuels my mission to bring you even more impactful content. And next week, I will continue to explore the amazing potential within ourselves. Until then, keep striving, keep dreaming, and keep moving forward towards your best life. I am your host, Angel Gonzalez, and this is the Life Coaching Podcast.